Today, we're going to recap the 2021 American action sci-fi movie, The Tomorrow War. The movie starts in Miami Beach, where Dan Forrester and other soldiers fall from the sky into a devastated landscape. They land in a pool, and more people keep falling alongside them. The story then rewinds 28 years to December 2022. Dan is a biology teacher who lives with his wife Emmy and daughter Muri. During a Christmas party at their home, he eagerly awaits news about a job opportunity at a research institute. Unfortunately, he receives a phone call informing him that he didn't get the position. Meanwhile, the guests are enjoying watching a live World Cup football match on TV. Dan, feeling down about the job rejection, sits with his daughter Muri, seeking comfort. She reassures him, trying to cheer him up as they watch the game together. Suddenly, the TV starts flickering, and a strange event occurs in the football stadium. A wormhole opens up, and soldiers from the future emerge, confusing the viewers. One of the soldiers, Lieutenant Hart, addresses everyone, explaining that humanity will face extinction in 30 years due to a massive alien invasion. Their goal is to recruit individuals who are willing to jump into the future and prevent humanity's annihilation. A year passes, and in response to the revelation from the future, governments worldwide begin constructing jump facilities to bolster their military forces. However, only a small number of the initial military personnel sent into the future survive, leading to the implementation of a draft for the fight against the extraterrestrial white spikes. Civilians are now selected to join the battle for a harrowing 7 days, with the majority never returning, and those who do return deeply scarred by the experience. Dan receives a call to report for the draft and undergoes evaluation, which reveals that he meets the qualifications due to having died in the time leading up to the invasion. He has no choice but to comply, as his wife Emmy will be drafted if he doesn't. Dan's past as a squad leader in Iraq 15 years ago is also brought to light during the evaluation. With only 24 hours to prepare, Dan visits Emmy at her job as a therapist for returnees from the draft. She informs him that his estranged father, James, might be the only person who can help the family stay safe. Despite harboring resentment towards his father for abandoning him and his mother long ago, Dan decides to seek his assistance. However, when he visits James, he finds that his father distrusts the government, and that's why he is off the grid. Before Dan can ask for help, James says he's never wanted his help, which irritates Dan because that's all he's ever wanted from him. Returning home to Emmy and their daughter Muri, Dan breaks the news of his draft. Muri is devastated, knowing that he may not return. Tearfully, they say their goodbyes as Dan prepares to face an uncertain and dangerous future. Dan reports to the draft where he meets Charlie, Dorian, Nora, and Cowan, among others. The draftees are informed about the time-jumping process and the mission plan. To avoid a paradox, Charlie tells Dan that they send people who died before the war, while also mentioning that Dorian jumped back after killing a white spike. With no time to prepare, the draftees are hurriedly sent through the jump link into the future, landing on Miami Beach. They learn of an emergency. The last research center studying white spikes has been attacked, and it's crucial to prevent its destruction. The soldiers are sent in before receiving proper training due to the urgency of the situation. However, a mishap occurs during the jump, resulting in some draftees falling to their deaths, while others, including Dan, land on a rooftop swimming pool. After regrouping, they report to Colonel Romeo, who reveals the military's plan to bombard the area to eliminate all living things, including the white spikes. Their mission is to rescue lab personnel before the bombs are dropped. As they move into the facility, they find the lab crew dead. Dan is tasked with retrieving critical samples and leaving immediately as the area is infested with white spikes and there are no other humans left. Mission Control decides to destroy the site, dispatching fighter planes for the mission. With only 6 minutes before the bombing begins, they hurriedly collect the necessary lab samples while descending the steps. Halfway down, they spot a white spike following them, and it kills one of the soldiers. The team fights back, but a massive group of white spikes emerges, giving chase. Rushing downstairs, they shoot at the creatures, but some soldiers are killed while others manage to escape. Dan confronts a white spike and shoots it, providing a brief moment of reprieve, but the creature continues to pursue them. In a desperate attempt to distract the white spike, Dan instructs the others to keep moving while he faces the monster alone. He shoots relentlessly, but his ammunition runs out, leaving him defenseless. Just as the white spike is about to strike, Dorian arrives and kills the creature, saving Dan. With just 3 minutes left before the bombing begins, Mission Control sends Humvees to assist the team, offering a chance of safety. However, the streets are filled with soldiers completely overwhelmed by the relentless white spikes. Eventually, they spot the Humvees, but the distance is too great, and the white spikes destroy them before they can reach the vehicles. With the bombing underway, they continue running. Nora and Cowan then engage in a firefight with the monsters to buy some time. The entire city becomes engulfed in flames, causing everything to turn black. After waking up at a military encampment in the Dominican Republic, Dan finds out that only he, Dorian, and Charlie managed to escape. Dorian reveals that he has terminal cancer and is indifferent to the possibility of death. They are then given new assignments. Dan is summoned by the colonel, who turns out to be his daughter, Muri. Though he tries to embrace her, she keeps her distance and explains that she is now a PhD in biotechnology and heads the research team. Muri invites Dan to join her on a mission to capture a female white spike, the creatures responsible for decimating more than half of humanity in just 3 years. Curious about his own fate, Dan asks Muri about his death and what happened to her and Emmy, but she avoids the conversation. They reach a cave housing the female white spike, a queen protected by the males. Attempting to catch her, a group of soldiers is decimated, and Muri instructs Dan to stay in the helicopter while she descends into the cave. During the fierce battle, the female nearly kills Muri, but just in time, Dan intervenes and saves her. Together, they manage to trap the female white spike in a cage and attach it to a helicopter. As they attempt to flee, other white spikes attack, causing one helicopter to crash. Unfazed, they escape in a car and drive towards safety. During their ride, Muri confronts Dan about his past actions, revealing that he abandoned Emmy and Muri when she was 12 years old, and later died in a car accident when she was 16. Dan insists that he would never willingly abandon them. They are rescued by a chopper that transports the female white spike to a lab in the middle of the ocean, where she is sedated and examined the next day. Muri aims to develop something to eliminate the white spikes, using samples from the female's body. They have already developed a poison effective against males, but the females are immune. Together they work on various tests to understand how the females combat the poison, hoping to find a solution. The challenge now is to mass produce and distribute the poison worldwide. Muri proposes sending the toxin back in time to prevent the white spike invasion from ever occurring, but Dan is reluctant to leave her behind. Just then, the computer announces a 100% match for the poison, signaling a breakthrough. The female white spike awakens and struggles to free herself. Meanwhile, the male white spikes descend upon the area, desperate to rescue the female. The situation becomes dire, and Muri puts Dan in a helicopter with the poison, instructing him to travel back in time. The jump link is activated, and everyone's focus is on getting Dan safely to the link. However, the male white spikes release the female, and the area is infested with the creatures. With only 5 minutes left before the leap, Dan and Muri find themselves surrounded by the relentless monsters. As they approach the jump link, the relentless numbers of white spikes surround Dan and Muri. Amidst the chaos, an arrow strikes Muri, incapacitating her just as they reach the chopper. The area erupts in flames, and in a heart-wrenching moment, a white spike grabs Muri and drags her away from Dan. With only seconds left to jump, Dan is forced to leave Muri behind. Dan is transported back to the present with a sample of the poison, but he learns that the jump link is damaged, rendering the poison useless in their fight against the white spikes in 2051. Charlie also returns with him, and outside the building, Emmy awaits Dan's arrival. Although visibly affected by the events, Dan doesn't say much until young Muri greets him with a welcome board. It finally prompts him to embrace her. Upon returning home, Dan opens up to Emmy about meeting adult Muri and working with her. Emmy speculates that the white spikes may have been on Earth long before the official invasion in 2048. At a bar, Dan meets Dorian and inquires about a white spike claw he kept as a souvenir. Upon finding ash from Russia on the claw, they, along with Charlie, deduce that the white spikes have been on Earth all along and were thawed out due to global warming. Dan, Charlie, and Dorian seek government assistance for a mission to Russia, but their request is denied amidst widespread protests and rioting worldwide, making travel impossible. Left with no other options, Dan reaches out to his engineer father for help, who arranges a plane and pilot for their mission. Lieutenant Hart and her crew join them, forming a determined team ready to confront the white spikes and uncover the truth behind their origins. Upon landing on the Russian glacier, the team heads uphill in search of evidence of the white spike presence. Strangely, their gadgets shut down, and upon investigation they discover a massive glacier with a magnetic field and a cave entrance leading inside. As they explore the cave, they stumble upon a wrecked extraterrestrial spacecraft with a different alien species, not resembling white spikes. Further into the cave, they find white spike pods, realizing that the creatures are not aliens, but rather deadly extraterrestrial weapons designed for planet-clearing purposes. The team successfully injects the toxin into some pods, killing the white spikes inside. However, more pods tremble, and some white spikes escape before they can be exposed to the poison. A fierce battle ensues between the crew, Dan's father, and the relentless creatures. Unable to contain the threat, they decide to blow up the ship, eliminating the majority of the white spikes. Despite their efforts, one female white spike survives and goes after Dan and James. After a grueling fight, Dan manages to inject the toxin, but the creature bites her own arm off to avoid its effects. In a final desperate move, Dan forces the toxin down her throat, causing her to plummet off a cliff and ending the threat once and for all. Word spreads about their successful mission, but the higher-ups take credit for it. The film concludes with Dan reuniting with Emmy and Murray, introducing his daughter to James. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel to see more of these movie recaps.